Welcome to another episode of GTM Innovators by 360 Insights. I'm your host, Kyle James. Today, we're diving into demand gen, especially how it relates to go to market with my guest here, Prashant Kaw, who Prashant Kaw is a longtime friend. Gosh, we've known each other for 15 years, going way back to our days at HubSpot, where we were runner-ups at a ping pong tournament, and we still go by the name Slammers today. So, Prashant, really great to kind of talk with you and connect again today. And you've got a fascinating background, serial entrepreneur, and you've spent many time. You've been marketing executive at multiple companies, specifically VP of Demand Gen at Commanda, VP of Marketing at CodeShip, and VP of Marketing at Continuum.
Yep.
And today you're founder at Helmer, and you also do some fractional CMO roles for a couple of companies. So, that's kind of my high level intro to you. What else do you miss, or what else do you think the audience here needs to know about you and your background?
No, that's really good. I just I like to tell people that the area I play in is part art and part science. So it's what I like to call architecture, right? So whether it's architecting marketing or it's the marketing ops and the technology stuff, right? It's sort of putting those two things to blending those two sort of parts of the brain together to sort of help companies grow successfully.
Love it. Love it. So I know, and I always think of you and your superpower of demand gen, right? Like that's what you're known over the years for. And really want to dive in today and talk about like how you see AI reshaping demand gen and what are some of the things that you're doing out there with companies, but that you're also seeing on the landscape. And I'm sure like we'll be able to fill all of our time kind of digging in here. So yeah, what are you seeing out there? It seems like it's fascinating and stuff is changing so fast.
Oh man, we live in interesting times. Before we sort of jump into the specific demand gen aspect, I want to share something I heard from someone who said something, crystallized something for me really, really well,
Okay.
right? This is from David Boskovic. He's the CEO of Flatfile, and they have an agentic software that helps companies with data transformation, helping companies with their data needs. And what he said is that in any innovation cycle, there's typically four phases, right? So you've got this, phase of discovery when you're first figuring out what is possible with the specific, let's say AI in this case, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got sort of the material science phase, like what are the practical applications and use cases of AI? And then you get this sort of commoditization phase where
Hmm.
there's sort of now broad manufacturing of the tools and how to deploy them. And then finally, there's this sort of phase of commercialization when you're trying to sort of really work out the economics of the technology and innovation. And for the first time in history, things are moving so rapidly with AI that you have all four of these phases happening at the same time,
Yeah.
right? You're still figuring out what is possible with AI. You're still trying to figure out what are the use cases and applications, right? You're still trying to figure out how to apply it broadly across your organization if possible. And then the question of how much is this going to cost, especially with how all the AI platforms and tools are sort of evolving so quickly. So
Why is that? Let's dive into it. Is that just because the iterations are happening so fast, or just as we wrap our hands around one thing, there's already two other new things that have come out, or it's like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know, right? Because I think last year a lot of people were using, at least in the demand gen marketing, right? You saw a lot of applications that were tied to sort of content and maybe to AI SDRs, right?
Hmm.
But now it seems, and then there was I felt there was a little bit of a lull, and now suddenly it seems like it's going gangbusters, and there's all kinds of applications, right? People are building CRMs, they're building agentic workflows, right? You've got the idea of building mass agents that will be sort of workers for you, doing all kinds of different tasks. So I think that's again, it's going through this new cycle of what are practical applications, but I think a lot of the cost part is still not figured out just yet, right? How much this will cost you, right? So I think that's one angle of it.
Yeah.
The other angle, which I wanted to get in a little bit later, but we can sort of touch on it briefly, is sort of the governance and compliance,
Right.
which is, large enterprises. I'm sure they want to start using AI right away, but if you imagine if, as a demand gen person, you've got a database and suddenly some agent changes all of your opt-out people to opt-in for
Yeah.
some reason, and suddenly people who aren't subscribers start getting emails, right? There's some serious liability there,
Right.
right?
Right. And who do you blame,
So,
right? Does the person
and
who put it
who
in there gets fired, or is that like a oops, it was AI, or yeah, like
exactly. So there's definitely use cases where there's less liability. Can you pull together and assimilate, like you can transcribe our podcast really quickly and create outlines and blog articles. There's probably no liability in that. Companies that are doing, content marketing are probably worried about plagiarism and citing sources appropriately, but I think a lot of that can be validated very easily.
yeah.
But if you suddenly have a bunch of software agents going and changing things in your system, you probably want to have a better understanding of how that's going to work, when it's going to happen. So I think it's a lot of people are being cautious about that too.
Right. Right. I mean, it seems like the content stuff is obvious, right? If it could help you create more content easier, like obviously that's always a good thing. But what do you think is kind of the biggest change that's going on right now, especially in demand gen marketers? Is it the ability to just be able to produce content faster, or do you see a lot of people doing a lot more of that workflow, agentic workflow, to kind of customize and segment their audiences a lot deeper ways than they ever have before?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all. I think the content is the easiest use case to understand, and it's also the repurposing of the content into multiple formats,
Mm,
right? So I think that's huge. A company I've been talking to recently is actually doing something even more interesting. What they do is that they have some agentic software that will analyze the content viewed by all your contacts within your HubSpot account, for example.
okay.
So it starts to make a content interest graph for each user in your database. And if you have social profiles for them, it can actually go out and research and augment that content graph with additional content interest based on stuff you've posted on LinkedIn, stuff you've liked. And they can also augment that based on some of the tags on your profiles and some of the skills that are associated with your profiles.
Wow.
So and then based on that, they can create a customized, personalized journey for you, whether it's on your website because of the integrated CMS,
Mm,
or through curating personalized emails directly within a HubSpot for you, right? So if you think of the level of efficiency for the amount of personalization and customization possible here, it's incredible,
so
right?
you're already seeing companies do literally cohort size of one, right? Like,
Exactly.
because you could specifically target and could create custom content that's slightly different for every single user because you know who they are and they know that's wild.
Exactly.
That
And
is
then on
wild.
top of that, then they use the same knowledge and content graph about you to help you build audiences. And then
Uh-huh.
what you do is you take these audiences and you import them into your paid marketing platforms and display platforms. And then you can, again, hyper target them for relevancy because you know exactly what their interests are. So it's super, super interesting to be able to get that level of detail now, at least for B2B,
Yeah,
right? I think B2C companies and probably have that level of detailed segmentation and information about their consumers and are able to do this routinely.
fascinating.
But
Yeah.
for B2B companies to be able to do this very efficiently, I think is fascinating. This is the exciting part about using technology that's so efficient and you just use a few prompts to sort of program and um, refine how you think about your segmentation and you're off to the races.
That's crazy. So, right, all you need is a little bit of prompt engineering. Is I like to just think about prompt, basically you're writing a scope of work, right? But like
Yep.
what else are you seeing is like the foundation or the framework that people need to think about putting in place that everybody needs to do? It's just part of good, clean living if you want to start being able to take advantage of these things. Is there
Yeah.
kind of like a step-by-step guide or playbook that you kind of think through and
Um,
go through?
There isn't, and I wanted the conversation to sort of end on sort of this note. But
We can come back if you want to
yeah,
punt it.
let me talk about sort of one or two other use cases first, and then we'll come back to what I think is going to be the bigger challenge after a lot of these applications and use cases have been
Okay.
figured out.
Yeah, give me some more
Right?
fascinating stories.
Yeah, and the answer is actually very simple. But I think it was something that you brought up, right? Which is one of my clients, what they do is they don't use very standard verticals for segmenting their go-to-market,
Mm,
right? A lot of companies will say, "Hey, I'm going after telco companies, healthcare companies, blah blah blah," right? And
right.
you probably have, the classic SIC codes, NAICS, NAICS codes for industry classification. But this particular customer has got a very unique way of sort of segmenting their ICP.
Okay.
And we were running into issues, through our enrichment processes, through, the typical data providers like Zoom and Apollo, et cetera,
Follow.
right? And we just weren't getting the right fit of customer based on that enrichment. But what we found was a lot of the salespeople could eyeball a company's website or description, and very like literally within a seconds they would see a few things, and they could say, "Yep, this one's a fit, that one's not a fit, this one's a maybe," right? And unfortunately, a lot of this data is not really available in structured databases.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was we used some prompt engineering to replicate their eyeballing.
So you train the algorithm on like keywords and specific phrases and stuff that you look for to kind of
Exactly,
identify. Yeah.
exactly. So we use this tool called Respell, which is essentially an agentic workflow tool. And we used it to essentially look up LinkedIn profile of the company as well as the website, right? And we gave it criteria, right? Look for companies that provide XYZ service, right? But exclude companies that provide these kinds of services. We fed it key terms. We gave it example companies.
Mm,
And then we also gave it negative examples, right? And this was by a little bit of a trial and error, right? When we first built it, we started getting sets of companies, and the tagging that came in wasn't that good. And so step by step, we had to learn, and it's almost like what you would do in AdWords, right? You put in keywords, then you put in negative
Sure.
keywords, right? So we did the same thing with sort of the prompt engineering. So we gave them examples, and then we gave them negative examples. And then there were use cases where there was an overlap, right? And so for each vertical, essentially, we essentially did that and gave them guidance for what was a match, what was not a match, and then what was an overlap. And based on
Interesting.
that, we were able to enrich our entire database based on our custom requirements. And that really helped sort of define the go-to market by these sort of sub verticals, and it sort of fed the entire outbound strategy.
So it's interesting you talk about this because I just had a conversation with John Marcus, who I know you also know really well,
Yeah.
talking about what he calls AI QLs, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're doing some of that stuff too, right? Using what you can enrich the qualified lead, the lead that you have,
Yeah.
to kind of say, is this a good fit or not, and kind of helping hand that off to sales
Totally.
in kind of a lot better ways. It's interesting
Exactly.
that y'all are independently kind of using these tools for very similar, probably maybe somewhat the same kind of
Yeah.
aspect, but he didn't talk anything about the negative aspect of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
And
really
I'll
useful way to think too.
I'll touch a little bit more on that, but I'll tell you one issue that we're sort of running into, and we still have to find a solution for it. So while we have the ability to enrich our first party data
Hmm.
using this methodology, when we go to systems like LinkedIn or Facebook, or tools that integrate with like a primer where you sort of build audiences, um, we aren't able to use the same methodology based on our vertical definitions because they use classical definitions, right?
Sure.
So while we're able to do some of our internal sort of first party demand gen capability, whether it's outbounding or through our email marketing, et cetera, right? We're able to leverage this. It runs into some scaling issues as you start doing second party or third party. So it ends up being how do you consistently build your operations and data to be able to do this consistently everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so the way around that is you're sort of exporting lists and importing them as sort of list audiences as opposed to using the native segmentation. And the good thing is that also these tools are going to get smarter, right? With their sort of predictive audiences and as they're sort of building their AI capabilities, right? Facebook or Meta has almost completely abandoned being able to build audiences, right? They just let their algorithm do all the targeting now going forward. So it's just so these are some of the things that people are going to have to sort of figure out, right? Like
Right.
while you're able to successfully use AI capabilities someplace, are you able to consistently do that across the board and don't start running into data silos across all your operations? So that's a interesting gotcha. Um, the other thing that
Yeah.
other use case that we sort of working on, we just started doing is one of the CRMs one of my clients use is called Adio.
Okay.
So surprisingly, not a HubSpot, not a Salesforce, not a Zendesk, not one of your classic CRMs, but this is one of the newer sort of CRMs that's a little bit more AI savvy.
Okay. Is it more an
And
AI native or industry
yeah,
specific?
yeah,
Okay. Interesting.
exactly, exactly. I wouldn't say that it's as AI native as sort of the Day.ai, the Christopher O'Donnell sort of startup from
Yeah, the one that's
Sequoia.
coming.
Yeah, they're a completely native from the ground up AI CRM, but these guys are new enough that they're building a lot of AI capabilities into them. But essentially, any lead that comes in, um, we are sort of grading the persona and we're grading the company fit. So, what this company does is they have a use case that's relevant, but now, along with the use case fit, we're able to do the persona fit and the company fit. So in terms of how we can make sure that we're hitting our ICP
Mm-hmm.
and that the need is the highest, we're completely doing this using prompt engineering instead of hard coding, formulas or automations that say, oh, if the title is this, then the persona is this and the grade is that, right? We used to have to write all these kinds of automations and workflows to do all of this, which was time consuming. It would
Yeah.
break. It was just never perfect. And while our sort of prompt engineering isn't 100%, it's still flexible enough and easy enough that we can do it really quickly and iterate on it really quickly and refine it to the point where it's good enough.
So I want to dig into that. Let's double click there, right? Like, would you say that it's better, like because it has the ability to be a little bit more flexible and intuit a little bit better? Is it in general, is it always better than the workflows that you built in the past?
It's better in the
Is it on
sense that I
par?
feel that it's more scalable because
Sure.
anytime there was any big data augmentation or any pivot,
Or
we
an
would
edge
have to
case.
go and have to go and re-engineer all the automations to support that or accommodate that, right? So
Right.
hard coding a lot of this stuff the old way, and this is the classic area where AI fits in, right? It's never going to be perfect, but it's always going to contextually get better much faster,
Are you
right?
seeing that too? The more you've kind of done that,
A-
that the algorithms are getting better?
Absolutely, right?
That's
Because
cool.
the ability to just change a few prompts and sort of give it a little bit of guidance is so much easier than having to go and either try and hack the code yourself or then work with a data engineer and have them build something very specific for you, right? So
Yeah.
I think the ability for the lay business person to drive change much quicker. Sometimes it's just about the time to market, right? How quickly are you able to do this stuff and
Sure.
sort of drive change, right? So you don't let good enough get in the way of what's the saying? Don't let good get in the way of being perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to keep moving.
Oh, don't let
That's
perfect
fascinating.
get in the way of being good enough. Yeah,
So that's fascinating that it's really that quickly overtaken all the complicated
yeah,
workflows and just now it just kind of handles that and you can kind of just
exactly.
tell it how you want it to tweak.
Yeah.
How are you? Because I know a few years ago we saw a lot of the demand channels like get changed up a lot. It's kind of COVID and work from home. How do you feel that like have you seen the way that you're generating leads and the different channels that you're using to generate leads change a lot through demand gen recently? And how is AI impacting that? Like
Um,
your the way you're spending budgets and such?
um, yes and no. I don't think I've necessarily seen the impact of AI on channels, or at least some of them, and I'll talk about which one is sort of the odd one out there. But in general, I think the go-to market function in industry is going through an upheaval, right? I think the whole notion of attribution has been upended recently,
Do tell.
right? And it's just the whole idea behind dark social. And I don't think any company has still solved dark social, but I think there's probably
Explain dark
um,
social just in case
yeah,
anybody
and
out there.
I'll explain that. But there's almost ubiquitous recognition that dark social plays a huge role in attribution. And dark social is the following, right? Um, you look in your attribution results at the end of any cycle and you say that I got X number of uh, you know, deals or opportunities from AdWords, right? Guess what? It technically wasn't AdWords that prompted that user to come to your site. It was a conversation with someone on LinkedIn. It was probably in some thread where there were some comments, and maybe they did a Google search, and maybe they clicked on a Google AdWord, right? So you think that as a company deciding where to place their bets with their budget, you're seeing AdWords in your attribution data, and you said, hey, we should spend more on AdWords. The reality is you probably need to be spending more time engaging with conversations on organic
Yeah.
social, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the notion behind dark social. And attribution is just so hard to do, right? What do you use, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can agree, at least in B2B, nobody can agree, should you use first touch attribution all the time? Do you use last touch? Do you use a classic W model or a U model, right? So um,
Do you have a
it,
strong opinion one way, or is it really depends on the company?
I think it depends on the question you are trying to answer, right? So I look at multiple attribution models to sort of answer different things, but still at the end of the day, it is never perfect. And even if it does get really good, it only ends up being good for, I don't know, 60% or maybe 50% of your database. You're still 50% completely blind.
Yeah.
So it's no matter what you do, it's never good enough to really say that, oh my God, this is the holy grail of how we should be allocating our energies and resources, right? So I think most of the brave minds have now sort of come out and said that you just have to do good community engagement and customer experience to do healthy marketing, right? And to be successful with your funnels. And guess what? There's no quick answers to this, right? You have to build up a brand. Building up a brand takes time. It takes dollars too, right? It takes
Yeah.
also people to sort of engage. You can't use AI generated content. That's crap. It doesn't work,
Right.
right? We recently learned that HubSpot has lost
I was gonna ask you
80%,
about that.
80% of its. I'm not saying that their content was AI generated, but it necessarily wasn't the content that sort of is not ranking anymore was not tied to their core business, right? It
Well,
was
how much of
clear
that
at
though do you also think was just like people don't search for things, they just go ask Chat GPT or something now? And where some of those long tail search results just aren't happening anymore because we're not
absolutely,
consuming the content the same way.
absolutely. We we were just having a discussion with a customer. They wanted to start using their G2 crowd badges on some promotional materials. And our basic sort of feedback to them was that G2 crowd is reviews are kind of dead right now,
Hmm.
right? They've lost 80% of their organic traffic. Everybody knows that G2 crowd is pay to play, right? And there's a little bit of a grain of salt because you offered it, everyone who did a review, half of them got a Starbucks card or something to say
Sure.
something nice about you. So the real hard way and the good way to do it is work with, Gartner paid reviews or make sure that industry experts understand what your technology does and how it's better than the competitors and have them write reviews about you,
Yeah.
right? So,
Right.
or nurture influencers, right? So I think people see plays and they want to they want these formulas to replicate.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, and I could probably go into a little bit of a tangent and say how the movie industry, tries to follow formulas and those formulas don't work anymore.
Right.
The same thing over here, right? The old plays aren't working anymore. So you just have to go back to the basics and just do good, do good marketing.
So you're saying creativity and originality are still really important.
Super, super,
Bingo.
super.
Bingo. So I do want to go back to kind of the whole HubSpot like thing because it was all over the I don't remember that was a week or two ago now, but
Yeah.
basically a lot of the charts shown was it sometime in the last 18 months their organic traffic just cratered. and has
Yeah.
gone down to something like 30% of the volume that it was.
Yeah.
I'm curious, one, like, have you seen similar trends like that in any of the customers you work with? And two, um, how are you working with your teams thinking about SEO? And are they now becoming like, how do you even call it, to like educate the AIs on your company? Like, are you doing some of that so that when someone goes and asks for, hey, is this a what do I use for this, that your company shows up in the AI approved
Yeah.
recommendations?
Yeah, so I'm not the most knowledgeable person about this, but I read and I
Okay.
attend webinars. So I'll regurgitate some of what I have learned here. But I would just like the audience to sort of go and sort of dig in with their own experts too, right? So I definitely see that overall Google-based SEO is taking and that's the primary classic SEO is has taken a big hit, and that's uh, probably across most industries, right? That's happening, but it also has to do with the type of content, right? So if we were talking about HubSpot, yes, they lost a huge bunch of traffic, but I would say that that was kind of the vanity traffic that really wasn't doing much to them.
Got
It
it.
made them, right? It made them tell everyone, "Hey, we've got billions of page views," but I don't know if all those extra page views were really driving their business, right? I
It was
think
the long tail. We ranked for some keyword that helped somebody solve a problem because we had a blog article on it from
yeah.
three
So
years ago.
I think that a lot of the content was sort of for the attention economy, right? It's like, okay, we have all these people here coming to our site. Now let's give them all kinds of content that will keep them here and
Yeah.
keep us top of mind, right?
So it's very much top of the funnel general awareness content. That's all.
Exactly, right? For
It's getting
example,
harder to get general awareness. That's kind
exactly.
of okay.
And I think the AI engines are also doing a much better job of sort of saying that, okay, this is what your offering is about, and this is the content that's relevant to your offering, right?
Hmm.
So anything that's tangential, they're not putting a lot of weight on. And so as people are searching, through prompts, hey, what does XYZ company do? They're not going to pull in all the ancillary information about it, right? And it's doing a much better job of being concise. There's less junk being put in front of people using
That actually
Chat
sounds like a good
GPT
thing
for
for us all, right? Like what you're,
abs
if I'm understanding you
absolutely.
correctly, like you're kind of saying like we've the signal to noise ratio has started to change, where we've
Exactly.
gotten to this point over the last 15 years where there's so much content out there. And let's be honest, most of it's not great. But
Exactly.
everybody was told content, 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 content. So everybody's out there writing 5 blog articles a week for their company, and
Yep.
there's not 5 interesting things
So
to say.
as a user, I love it.
Okay.
As like a head of experience, I love it,
Yeah,
right? As a demand marketer, I'm scared,
sure.
right? I want to be able to track it. I want to understand the source. I want to gamify it like I've gamified every other channel in the
Well,
past.
it's a playbook that's no longer working. It's worked for over a decade now. That's just,
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
I
it's
think
burning.
I think the playbook is create really good experiences and content, and go deeper in areas. Don't try to be all things to everybody, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to really pick your niche and just go really, really deep in that and do that really, really well.
How
Right?
do you feel about storytelling content, though? It seems like that's as important, as valuable as ever, though, now, right? Like being
Uh,
able to
could
tell that
could
interesting.
you give me an example of
Well,
what
I
you mean?
mean, the stories of your customers that are having success solving XYZ with your product, like being
Yeah,
able to actually really tell those stories instead of, I think B2B companies have gotten personally, like I'm
yeah,
gonna throw this out there. I think they've gotten really bad in the last 5 years of just what I call logo soup, right? They
yeah,
just stack on their website all the logo of the big companies we've heard of, but they don't
yeah,
actually tell me why they chose you and what interesting and valuable things they're getting out of it. They're just slapping the
yeah,
logos because it's easy.
yeah. So I'll just again share something I read recently, where The age of writing a how-to is almost dying, right?
Mm,
There's just so many how-to articles, right? But if you have a very unique way of doing something, right? So how does Kyle James do something, right? And all your customers have bought into the Kyle James methodology
mm,
of doing that specific thing. There is tremendous value and depth in that. And that is what companies should be trying to do is right is and you remember because we were both at HubSpot, what was the HubSpot way, right?
yeah.
We build a
Inbound.
methodology around inbound, right? So I think that that is what a lot of AI engines are looking for,
Hmm.
and how they're ranking and sort of organizing things in their data sets right now. So that's got me thinking,
Yeah.
and I think it again comes down to how you brand, how you position yourself, how you differentiate yourself, right? So these are again some of the harder things, and usually not always the top of mind things the average marketer or content person is doing while they're creating content, right? Because we lived in an age of mass content production. uh, the more strategic content creators, the product marketers, right? The SMEs, they're probably thinking of these sort of flavors of their content,
Hmm.
right? And I think just again, using Chat GPT and other tools to mass produce content is not going to be good enough, right? It has to be the right content with the right flavor. So it's just,
Sure.
I think, again, the tool is still going to be an assistant or a co-pilot for you.
Interesting. Interesting. It's fascinating. I think you're right. It makes sense when you really start thinking about it that way. So this has been fascinating, Prashant. I know that you had something where you kind of wanted to end it before we kind of wrap things up. So, you
Yeah,
want to bring back up that kind of line of thought again?
I do, right? So and this is again more from sort of running a software company that helps demand gen people and sort of having been a career demand gen person, right? That at the end of the day, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out,
Yeah.
right? So you can have the most brilliant prompt engineering, you can have the best agentic workflows, but if you don't have good data, then whatever your workflows and your prompt engineering is doing is not going to be good enough. So I think marketers are going to have to continue to think critically about how they keep their data sets really, really clean and healthy so that they're always feeding these AI engines the best context about their business.
Mm.
Otherwise, as I said, garbage in, garbage out, right?
Keep it clean. Keep it
You
on
won't be
point.
getting the best outputs, right? So that's any tool will none of these tools will take the responsibility of having bad data fed to them. That's on the teams that are responsible for building the data sets and making sure that they're good for them. So I think there is still time over the next year or two as we move into that commoditization and commercialization phase of AI. But I do think that teams are going to have to think critically about how they sort of make sure that all their segmentation data and all their information is good and where they get it from.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good reminder, I think, for everybody.
Um,
Um,
I know,
Prash-
it's simple, not fancy.
well, it's getting back to basics, and to me, kind of what I'm also hearing you say is like, look, so much of this stuff that we've been doing for a while has gotten to the point where it's really easy to do, and we could start getting agentic AI to do some of those things for us. So let's get back to the basics and focus on the messaging, the branding, the value props, and those things. And if
And
marketers can really like own their foundation, the other stuff is easy now.
And that to me is the beauty of it, right? Is just that if AI makes the more monotonous,
Hmm.
repetitive tasks go away, you and me, we can spend our times on more strategic, creative tasks of it's not just about getting a campaign out the door, but getting the best campaign with the best message, right, to the right audience, right?
Right. At
That
the
to
right
me
time. Yeah.
at the right time, right? So,
Awesome. Well, Prashant, thanks so much for joining me today. And
hey, thanks for having me.
it's been incredible, insightful, and I'm sure our audience will find lots of value in like thinking of new kind of ways to do marketing and branding and such. And um, you know, I want to ask you, like we kind of teased a little bit over Helmer. What do you want to plug? What are your lats and longs? How could people, contact you or follow you or ask follow-up questions of you?
Yeah, I've got an agentic demand gen tool in the works. Sign up on our website. We've got some great news coming your way. So go to helmer.com and sign up on our guest list when we have news. We have some beta customers that are trying our product, um, and really excited to get other people in it soon.
Where else are you on Twitter as much anymore? Are you mainly a LinkedIn person?
Mostly on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm a lurker on Twitter, an occasional lurker on Twitter. I've probably pretty much abandoned.
I guess it's X
Uh,
now anyway. Shows how like I've
yeah,
kind of retired from most social media myself.
I've abandoned Facebook, and I never really adopted Insta like the cool kids have.
Yeah. That's what our
So
kids are
yeah,
for now.
so LinkedIn is where I'm at.
Awesome. Awesome. Where all you demand gen marketers out there, check out Helmer, what Prashant's doing over there. It is super cool the way that you can start breaking out funnels and measuring stuff. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, leave a review. If you have a question or a recommendation for a future subject or guest, please feel free to reach out and email me at research@360insights.com. And once again, Prashant, thank you so much for coming on this episode, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be next week. We'll be back next week with another go-to marketers, innovators, and guest. And until then, everybody, keep growing.